Hello everyone, I'm back with another video. I'm going to do an overview of the iPhone 15 Pro Max, Google Pixel 8 Pro, and the Samsung S24 Ultra. However, I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle. I'm not going to compare the phones completely directly. I'm going to talk more about Apple, Google, and Samsung experiences as a whole. I'll do some more comparisons with the phone, one to the other, with subsequent videos. But I just want to talk a little bit about just sort of general, having had used these phones for a while, just some of the general things I've experienced with them. Now, the Apple phone, the iPhone, I always have an Apple phone, an iPhone for a family. So that's my family phone. And I generally rotate my work phone uh, between Samsung and Google. And I was using for a while the Z Fold 5, but I decided to move on to the Pixel 8 Pro. Then I went back to Z Fold 5. And I'm using the S24 Ultra, and I think that's kind of where I'm settling in mostly. But that's a video for another time. What I really want to talk about though is just some generalities, right? So if you're deciding upon like which direction to go in, what are some of the pros and cons of each? And I'm going to go over like a list of just things that I feel are important, um, that I've had experience with in terms of just the day-to-day use of it. So I'll start with a few topics here. So connectivity. In terms of the internet, I've had no problems with any of them. They connect just fine. What I will say is that call quality, call connectivity, historically speaking, and it's sort of holding up. I've had the best luck with Samsung phones, generally speaking, and the S24 Ultra doesn't disappoint. The iPhone is pretty much a close second. I don't really have too many drop calls once in a while. On the other hand, the Google Pixel Pro, 8 Pro, and Google phones in general, I've had issues occasionally with people not being able to hear me as well or with more dropped calls. So that's something that I've noticed, and that's kind of something I feel has plagued Google a little bit. So there's that. One of the bigger issues is software in general, right? So software that is not, you might think Android versus iPhone or Android versus iOS. I kind of disagree with that sentiment. I think it's Samsung, Google, and Apple. Now, of course, this is obviously a US based channel, so our selections aren't as pronounced as they are in other countries. I know there are a lot of other phones out there. OnePlus would be the other major option, I guess, here in the United States that people might gravitate towards, but on a much smaller scale. These are generally the three operating systems that people will go with. Obviously, Apple is what it is, right? It doesn't have any customization. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't. You can't make it do anything other than what Apple wants you to do with it. It's basic. It works. Some people argue that it's the best for them, and it probably is. Others, would opt for one of the more customizable phones. I think when I had more time on my hands, customization was nice, but as you get older and have more responsibilities, you don't necessarily have time to be messing around with your phones too much. You just need them to work. I will say, in terms of software, though, my favorite of the three is the Pixel. It's customizable enough, although it's not quite as customizable as a Samsung phone. But the notifications on Android, on the pure Android, are very clean. They're clear. The voice dictation is outstanding. And I just feel like the experience as a whole is much smoother with the Pixel than it is with the other phones. And even though Samsung is running Android, I find it that and I prefer the S24 Ultra. That's my favorite phone, so I'm just going to say that up front. But in terms of software, as a whole, I kind of prefer the Google experience a little bit more because it's just cleaner. Um, Obviously with the S Pen, you have some more functionality. The whole AI stuff is still a little bit in its infancy, a little gimmicky. Now, if you're talking about AI on my laptop, that's a whole different conversation. But on my phone, it's not that much. It doesn't do much for me. My problem with Samsung is that it's way too many repetitive apps, right? So I have two calendar apps, I have two phone apps, two messenger apps. I don't need all that. And I know Samsung's trying to do their ecosystem thing, but It's not going to happen. Okay. If you know anything about any Samsung computers, I mean, you might as well just get a hot plate, right? Like, and double it up as a hot plate because I can cook eggs on those things. They heat up so much. So, Apple's got that on lock. I think Google, in the sense of having its software like Microsoft, having its software functionally all over the place, it helps them stay relevant in that sense. Personally, Samsung, I think just like they did with the watch, just give it up with the double apps, the repetitive apps. I do like some of the add-ons, obviously, but the Google, in terms of like the Google, the ability to say, "Hey Google," and like knock everything out and get everything that you need to done, and it function perfectly, versus Bixby versus Siri is no competition. Google is much better in that sense. So that Bixby is a joke to me. It functions as well as Siri in the sense of, oh, I can go ahead and set something on my calendar or what have you. But honestly, nothing competes with this here. Okay, with the Pixel phone. So there's that. I think the apps, though, in terms of optimization, you're talking about software experience as a whole. That's one thing, but optimization, it's the iPhone, right? It's the dominant phone. It's one operating system. It's not like multiple versions of Android on multiple different types of phones who add their own layer of skin on it. It's just everything is controlled by Apple. So the apps are much better for the most part on as a whole on the iPhone. Even some of the Google apps are better on the iPhone than they are on Google. They're more functional. So if you're into social media, which I'm not really too much, other than YouTube, I mean it's the best optimization you're going to get for social media apps is going to be on the iPhone. So there's that. So that's one thing that I would definitely give to Apple. So if you notice, like everything's kind of going, one to the other, right? Like one phone is good at this, one phone is good at that, and I haven't really praised Samsung quite yet, but I still think it's the best phone by far. And connectivity, I guess, would be the one thing. In terms of photography, I prefer the Google Pixel 8 Pro and the Google phones in general for photos, for still photos. For video, and this is pretty much the sentiment across the board, right? For video, obviously, it's the iPhone. I think, though, Samsung does a good enough job on both. I don't think there are no issues anymore with a big difference between photo quality and video quality. Although I will say the iPhone video quality probably, in terms of being able to capture motion, even in the photos, it's a little more consistent. I think that Google software sometimes takes a little time to figure it out, and I do notice that if there's a lot of motion, like with kids and pets and things like that, then the iPhone does a little better overall. But in terms of still photos, in terms of portrait mode, man, the Google Pixel 8 Pro is no joke. That thing, the photos are just amazing. I will say that the one issue I have with Samsung, although I think they've improved it with the S24 Ultra, is skin tone, right? So as somebody is a person of color, I kind of sometimes feel like my skin tone comes out better on the Pixel and even the iPhone, more so than I feel like the S24 Ultra lightens my skin a little bit too much, and I don't necessarily appreciate or want that. So there's that. Gaming. I'm not a big gamer. I do play like FIFA Mobile. I guess it's what FC Mobile now that they call it. I find that the iPhone actually, in terms of the touchscreen, it feels a little more agile. Like I feel like the games play a little bit better on it. At least that particular game. I don't play anything more complicated than that. But the others do just fine. I do feel like sometimes the S24 Ultra is a little less consistent, and I think that the Google Pixel sometimes drops frame rates, which for a game that's not that complicated, I can only imagine, on a much more complicated game how it would be. So I don't game at all on the Pixel 8 Pro, and I think that the other problem I have is that it heats up way faster. The S24 Ultra, the iPhone 15 Pro Max, they do not heat up at all. Like they're just good. And you notice I don't even say Pro Max, I just say iPhone because honestly, I feel like you can get a very similar experience outside of a couple of camera upgrades on the 15 Pro Max as you could on any other iPhone, and frankly, for many other years, right? So there's that. But there's that. Okay, so let's see. I think one of the things that bothers the crap out of me, and this is going to be really silly, but it's like volume control. Like I can just pick up this phone, right? Hit up, hit down, and everything is going to happen, right? Like in terms of that. And I can do the same thing here, but if I want to actually go into, if I have different, and oh, excuse me, the volume controls everything here, right? But the volume control here on these two phones, it's specific to what you're doing, like messages, calls, games, whatever, right? I don't need all that. I just need it to turn up and down. That's it. I need the volume up and I need the volume down. I don't need the volume every which way. Okay. So that's annoying as crap on both of these S24 Ultra and the Pixel 8 Pro on Android phones in general. It gets too cute. Like, stop that. Just give me one straight volume control and that's it. So there's that. Widgets. Now, this is part of the software experience, but to me, it's an important sort of thing, right? So like the widgets on the Android phones in general and, Pixel, I actually have to give it to Samsung a little bit on this one because I think there's more flexibility. And obviously you can buy widgets in the store, but I like the way that the stock calendar widget looks versus the stock calendar widget on the Pixel 8 Pro. I think that it's a little too cartoony. Like, for example, the calendar widget, right? And Apple, you can't customize it at all, right? So I don't, and I think Apple's implementation of widgets is really clunky, right? You have to go into like the side. It's just a very clunky experience. They don't quite, they just feel very boxy, right? You can't really customize them too much. Again, it's a lack of customization. I like Google's widgets because it's Android, right? So here, it's fine here, but I don't necessarily like the Pixel's cartoonish looks. I don't like the calendar look. Samsung is very clean. You can have it kind of transparent. There's more options, more custom. It's more customizable. And the widgets are important because, again, I use like the calendar app. I use like tasks, task manager. Those are always on. And then, weather and what have you. So those are good. I just feel like Apple's kind of half baked. Like they came to the party late and they still haven't really figured it out. Hopefully iOS gets an overhaul one of these days, but we'll see. Now getting into the phone, right? This is real basic stuff. The Face ID on Apple is flawless, right? It works pretty much all the time. It makes payments more secure. You can knock out the passwords with it, all kinds of stuff, right? I find myself navigating towards Apple Pay more so than Samsung or Google, just because, and the Apple Wallet, just because it's so easy to use. It's so customizable. I mean, not customizable. It's just easy to use. It's everywhere. I can do multiple things with it, right? Like it's not the Face ID is just much more secure, right? Fingerprint scanner, it doesn't exist on the iPhone, right? I wish it did. In terms of fingerprint scanner, I think Google is kind of pretty much catching up, right? Like it's arrived and it's very consistent. It's nothing I've had an issue with on this phone. On the 7 Pro, I felt sometimes it was a little off. On the 6 Pro, and I only had the 7 Pro for a while because I didn't see it as an upgrade from the 6 Pro. So I got rid of that phone. And on the 6 Pro, it was kind of hit and miss sometimes. But on the 8 Pro, it works perfectly. So I have no issues with the fingerprint scanner. And I had the 8 for a while. I traded the 8 in actually to get the Ultra through Spectrum because it was like $1,000 or whatever it was. Like, I think they gave me way more money than it was worth. And then when I had into it. But the fingerprint scanner works perfectly. I've had issues with the fingerprint scanner on the S24 Ultra. No issues at all with the fingerprint scanner on the Z Fold 5. So, which is what I'm filming on, so that's why it's not in the mix here. So I'm not sure why the S23 Ultra was perfect. Like I had no issues with fingerprint scanner. I've still occasionally have issues with the S24 Ultra fingerprint scanner. Maybe it needs a software update. I put my thumbs in multiple times. It doesn't seem to work. It's just more clunky. But there's that. So, getting into the phone though, that sort of thing. I mean, Apple Face ID is pretty much, on lock. Now, the accessories is interesting, right? You have the whole Apple ecosystem. Obviously, if you want an ecosystem based device, the iPhone 15 Pro Max or any iPhone is the way to go because it's going to integrate with your Apple computer, which I do use a Mac. I use a MacBook Air 15 M2 as my primary computer, and it'll work, with the AirPods. But I think that the AirPods, that implementation is really clunky. I prefer the Google Pixel Buds to the AirPods, not for sound, but for actual functionality, because the AirPods just go all over the place. If I have my laptop on or if I have my phone on, that's really inconsistent. I turn off the Bluetooth on my phone when I want to make sure that the AirPods stay on my laptop because I can't trust that they will. And when I'm in a Zoom call or something like that. The Apple Watch is outstanding. You're not going to find a better accessory specifically than the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch, in any of its iterations, I think is the best watch you can buy for in terms of as an accessory to your phone, hands down. But I will say that Pixel Watch 2 made a lot of strides this year, and I actually prefer it to the Samsung offerings. Samsung, they've, going back and forth on the software. They were at Tizen, now they're back to, and a lot of folks think that the Samsung, the Galaxy Watch 5 was actually better, right? Like with the Tizen software in terms of its battery life, its functionality, but it's not the new. I tried the 6 Classic and I didn't like it. I like the software much better, even though I prefer the size. The Google Watch, Pixel Watch 2 was much better. But I actually use the Apple Watch as my primary watch, especially for like fitness tracking and health tracking and things like that. But the ecosystem is what it is, right? But in terms of buds, I would have to go Pixel Buds, though, if you're talking about just here accessories for that, excuse me. Pixel Buds, then the Apple, and Samsung. I've had issues, quality control issues with Samsung Buds. I've had to return 2 pairs already, and I'm kind of done with them actually. So there's that. Yeah. So I think I mentioned voice texting already. I actually want to talk about the sort of thing that we do a lot, which is like text messaging, and that's what I primarily use my phone for in terms of communicating with people. I mean, people don't talk on the phone no more, it seems, right? Unless you're old head, right? Doing it old school. So I'm going to talk about voice texting and the keyboard. I don't like the keyboard. I think that the keyboard on the Samsung phone is the best, especially obviously with the on the Pixel phone, because obviously it has the best voice texting, right? So that's what I really like about it, and it just the UI is just easy to swipe. It's really I just prefer this experience for voice texting and for keyboard texting. I'm always making mistakes. If voice texting on the iPhone is the worst, okay? It's pretty solid on the S24 Ultra and the Galaxy phones or Samsung phones, and not quite as good as it is on the Pixel, okay? But the keyboard texting on the iPhone, I don't know why I make more mistakes on the iPhone than I do on these other 2 phones. Maybe because of the swiping, I'm not sure, but maybe I have clunky thumbs. But this is the worst texting experience for me. I hate voice texting on it, and I hate typing on it. These 2, I do both fine. I'm not sure why. It's just what it is. So there's that. In terms of like, I think for me as somebody who values productivity, I'm gonna, it kind of depends. I'm gonna have to kind of go with. It's really tough because I think personally, as somebody who relies a lot on the Microsoft Office, the integration with Microsoft Office for me is what sets the Galaxy phones, the Samsung phones, excuse me, S24 Ultra and the Z Fold 5 sets it apart. I use Microsoft Office. I don't really use the G Suite other than Gmail. I don't use all the other stuff. I don't use any of the software like that Microsoft already has. This is what I use for work. We're Microsoft heavy, and it's grown up stuff. I mean, this is what you do in the business world, right? You use Microsoft Office, as problematic as it can be at times, but the integration with Samsung phones, which for me as a productivity device makes Samsung phones the best for me, is unmatched. Okay. Uh, I find that the Microsoft apps, they're okay on the iPhone, maybe a little better on an iPad because you can kind of spread things out a little bit. But Apple apps, I don't use them. I don't use Keynote. I don't use Pages. Um, they've gotten better, but I just think they're clunky. And it's its own walled garden. So if that's what you're into, you can stay here in the Apple lane and be fine with it. That's good. The G Suite is great. I have no issues with it. It's just not business class, right? It's like economy class, right? It's basic stuff. I don't, I need the integration with Microsoft Office. And then with Dex being built into the software on the Samsung phones, that kind of puts it over the top, right? Like in terms of it as a productivity device. So I just kind of wanted to make this video to kind of talk about some of the pros and cons of each of these, phones. They're very expensive. Obviously, most people only have one. If I personally were to pick one, and again, I talk more generally about Samsung versus Google versus Apple. Samsung doesn't necessarily do all the things the best, but it kind of does some of the key things really well. And if you're kind of using a phone for productivity, for work, office type stuff, I think it's the best option personally. Now, obviously, if you really rely on Apple and you're into the ecosystem, me personally, I find it distracting to get text messages and FaceTime calls on my laptop, so I keep it on my phone. I don't like getting text messages on my laptop. I don't want that. I don't like it. I don't need it. It's distracting. It gets in the way of me getting work done. So phone sticks to the side, and the laptop is what it is, right? I use that for work. Whereas on the Samsung phone, I could actually, with Dex, you can kind of turn it into a laptop. Or if you're you're kind of stuck, you need something, you're in a hotel room, you want to plug something into a TV, you can do it with the Samsung phone, and you'll have a relatively solid functioning computer with Dex. And with Microsoft integration, it's really great. Or even with Google, if you're a G Suite person, it works just fine for that too. That's one thing I think Google needs to get on. I think they need to, if they really want to kind of push this, broader scope. It seems like they want to be more like the iPhone than they want to be, a productivity device, which is, take pictures and what have you. And that's fine because that's what most people use. But if I were to pick one as an all-purpose phone, I think I'd go with the S24 Ultra, as this is my favorite phone. It's even taken over my Z Fold 5 usage, because the S Pen integration, that's something that sets it apart from everything else, and it's really handy when you need to take a quick note, or even if I forgot my tablet, I can full on take notes in a meeting with this. So it's really solid in that regard. I think Google's trying to do the iPhone thing, and it's a cheaper alternative. As far as that aspect of it, cost or costliness, I think that the iPhone is actually, you don't really get them on sale. You got to pay for it, right? Samsung gives really great trade-in deals. Google's price at $799 for the base model. I have the 256, so it would be like $60 more. But $799, if you're gonna buy it just outright unlocked, this is an outstanding bargain of a deal. It's really great. The battery won't last as long, not even nearly as long as these other two. Samsung is the longest battery for me personally, but overall, budget wise, $799 for the base model 8 Pro, that's a great bargain. But with the trade-in offers with this, I only paid $350 for this thing with taxes included. So, it was a really good deal. It was really cheap. It had the sale, they had, just incentives to get it and what have you, and then the trade-in. iPhone, you're paying for it. You're just paying for it outright. So, that was the other reason why I think I would pick the S24 Ultra, because I can get it almost as cheap, if not cheaper than this. It has better trade-in offers than Google offers oftentimes. But if I was buying a phone outright, I would certainly look at the Pixel, because it's obviously bang for your buck. You get a lot for $7.99. You get it's not on this level. I mean, they kind of compare these three, but I don't think it's quite on this level in terms of build quality and what have you. But the pictures are really great. Video's solid enough. All the basic things you need are here. The text messaging is the best experience. My issue is the call connectivity and sometimes like internet connectivity, which I think is really important. So, but if you don't, that's fine. But it is what it is. Okay, well, that kind of wraps this up. This is a super long video, maybe the longest one I've ever made. Not sure. 25 minutes in. I hope you're well. I hope your family's well, and take care of yourselves. See you next time. Bye.